Welcome, Slayer the Alchemist, and welcome to special Dudes Talking Metal. This is going to be a Dudes Talking Ozzy, Dudes Remembering Ozzy, Dudes Praising the icon, the legend, Ozzy Osbourne, that sadly passed away yesterday at the age of 76. Darren and I made a video yesterday, a pretty emotional video, as the news had just broken 30, 45 minutes before we made our video. Joining me is Butch and Mike from For the Sake of Heaviness. They also did a video in Ozzy's memory. Joining us is also Tony Dio from Tony Dio's Metal Emporium. Tony, I know I saw you on some channels also yesterday. Almost Human, I think, was
Yeah.
one of them. So we've
Yeah.
all kind of done our videos with our reaction to Ozzy's passing. And we thought today that we would do a video just remembering Ozzy, remembering the icon, remembering the legend, the memories that we have of hearing Ozzy, the impact that he had on our heavy metal journey. So, guys, thanks for joining me here. Let's start with Mike. Let's start with you. Do you remember the first time you heard Ozzy? Where was it? Was it Sabbath? Was it Ozzy solo? What was your impressions? Do you remember the first time you heard Ozzy and what you thought?
I think the name Ozzy preceded me actually hearing him. And Butch and I were talking about this too. And I've tried to really pinpoint that first time. And it might not necessarily be the first time I heard Ozzy, but definitely the time that it really sunk in. I've got memories tied to certain songs and particular albums. But I forgot to mention this when Butch and I were talking until today. Um, the Black Sabbath's greatest hits. We'd probably heard a couple of the songs. Of course, Paranoid I think is an intro for a lot of people. But we went on a camping trip like we always did every summer with his parents. We rode for about 6 hours in the back of a little Toyota pickup truck with a little camper on the top of it, and that's the only thing we listened to over and over and over was Black Sabbath's greatest hits. And I really truly feel it was that little 6 hour ride back and forth where, Black Sabbath took hold of us and we were like, this is important. This is, like nothing we had ever heard. And even though we might have heard it before, it really made its mark. It really sunk in because we spent that much dedicated time with it. And from then on, it was, you know, the background of our life forever. Sabbath and Ozzy was always a constant soundtrack for everything that was going on. I remember the first time that we heard Blizzard of Oz, and we were just amazed at Crazy Train, and the intro was so spooky and freaked us out. And I've mentioned this before too. I can remember when we got Bark at the Moon. I can distinctly remember sitting in my friend Jeff's living room at his house and putting it on his mom and dad's console stereo, and Jakey Lee just come ripping right out of the speakers, into the title track, and it just awed us to the point where we were like, oh, you're speechless because it's just you get so excited over that. And then another, I was really tied to the Ultimate Sin album when I was in college, and the guy down the hall from me was really, really big on that album too. And I think we had, been partying or whatever, and he got this brilliant idea that, hey, you hit play at the same time as me, and we'll get Ultimate Sin in stereo all the way down the dorm halls. And we were like, that's the greatest idea I think anybody's ever come up with. So we spent like 2 hours trying to sync it up to where the Ultimate Sin would just come pounding out at the same time. And
That's
finally,
good.
one of the other guys down the hall was like, would you guys shut up? I'm so sick of hearing this.
I'm trying to study for my biology test.
Yeah, we thought we were just on to the biggest discovery. We're going to do this. I don't know,
What
but
happens if we got 100 people with the ultimate sin to all press play at the same
yeah,
time?
we'll get everybody upstairs and open the windows, man. So it's memories like that that just prove just how ingrained Ozzy was into everyone's lives, and it was always there. Even getting out of school, it was like the top priority was like, if it matched up, it's like, who's going to see Ozzy this summer? Or, I'm heading down to the record store. We got to get the new Ozzy. It was just, Ozzy was always a constant. So yeah, from an early time, it sunk in with us on just how important Ozzy and Black Sabbath was.
Nice. How about you, Tony?
I've told the story about my whole introduction to Black Sabbath, Ozzy, Dio, everything. A guy on the school bus, an older guy, gave me a like a TDK cassette tape. It had Heaven and Hell on one side and Blizzard of Oz on the other. That was pretty much my
Nice.
introduction to all of that. But I did hear, I mean, I knew who Ozzy Osbourne was, and I remember. I don't know if you guys, when you were in elementary school, did you have music class where they let you like one day a week bring records and play, and you kind of
Hmm.
discuss them? I remember this guy brought the 45 single for Crazy Train, and I heard that song then, and I thought it was cool, but it was like I said, it was several years probably before, maybe another year and a half before I actually got that cassette with the Ozzy stuff. But I just remember, I was just starting to pick up rock magazines like Hit Parader, and of course, Hit Parader at that time hadn't gone all metal. So you'd get a Hit Parader and you might have Billy Squire and Pat Benatar and stuff mixed with Judas Priest and Ozzy and stuff, And I didn't even realize that Ozzy was a singer in Black Sabbath at that time. I just knew he was this kind of crazy looking dude. And going in the record store, and this is the latest release, and I see this. I mean, that picture just that was just like, what is that? That's the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life, because I thought Ted Nugent looked crazy because I saw the cover of Screen Dream, and I'm like, in Cat Scratch Fever, I'm like, that dude must be the wildest dude in the world. And my friend that I grew up had a lot of music. He had a lot of records. He turned me on to Kiss and Foghat and ZZ Top and stuff. And I remember he had a Ted Nugent record, but he never had any Black Sabbath records that I ever remember. But yeah, so it kind of just came from there, man. Just built. I eventually I got someone to record me Diary of a Madman, and then the first Ozzy purchase that I got with that I went out and bought the real cassette was Speak of the Devil, because I was like, I got to have that. I got to know what that is, and I had no clue that this is Black Sabbath songs when I
Mm.
first got it. So I get into that, and I'm listening to these songs. I'm loving it. I'm loving Brad Gillis's guitar playing on that album and stuff. So Sabbath comes in I go in and I get what Mike mentioned, Black Sabbath's greatest hits, because you could pick that up at most of your like five and dime
Yeah.
stores, discount stores. They always had a discount bin, and I got the Black Sabbath's greatest hits record for maybe like $2 or $3 or something. And I remember the album cover with that Triumph of Death cover, and I play that record and stare at that album cover because
Mm.
it just fit right with that music. But I also thought the first time I listened to that music that, God, this is old sounding. This sounds like it was recorded in the Stone Age, because I'm used to hearing this 80s version of all these same songs done by Ozzy on Speak
Interesting.
of the
Yeah.
Devil. So, I'm hearing the original version. It just sounded like sludgy and old to me, but I ended up just, getting more and more into it. And I just started like buying stuff like crazy and trading and buying blank tapes, and you get with your buddies and you go copy what they got, and you hook them up with something, and not the tape trading like through the mail where you discover. This
Mm.
is just amongst a circle of friends, just trading stuff and discovering stuff like that. And that was like about a year or two before we got MTV. Actually, we got MTV in '83, so that really opened me up to seeing stuff. And I remember that Ozzy concert from Irvine Meadows. They would show
Mm.
that on the Saturday night concerts.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if you guys ever noticed that, but if you're familiar with that show, the a friend of mine recorded it. I remember he had a beta machine and he recorded
Yeah.
that concert. So you go to his house, we'd watch it, and he eventually made me a copy of it years later. Got it on VHS, and then I later got the version that came out on Laserdisc or DVD. Man, they went back in the studio and redid all the vocals in there, just
Oh
like the
God, yeah.
original, the Speak of the Devil show. Because I mean, Ozzy didn't sound bad that night, but they did a lot of doctoring,
Yeah.
before they released it on Laserdisc. yeah, I was like, wow, it was like two different watching two different versions of it in a way, But
Yeah.
yeah, but that we were all at that age where everything was just, it was just like opened up to us at one time, that this vault of just all this stuff, and Ozzy was definitely one of the main players in that for me.
Yeah, nice. Butch, how about you? You're muted, Butch.
There you
There
go,
you
T.
Sorry, I'm an idiot. I
go.
um I'm sure I'd heard Sabbath, but honestly, I wasn't aware of who was in the bands when I'm sure I'd heard Iron Man and Paranoid prior to hearing Ozzy Osbourne. But really, the my introduction to him was my mother had a friend that she'd met through. There was this group called Parents Without Partners, and that my mother joined after my father passed, and she met this other woman, Ronnie, and there was another woman named Marietta, and they hung out and stuff. And Ronnie's kids, Donnie and Dawn were, I think Dawn was like 6, 7 years older than me, and Donnie was in his early 20s. Anyway, my mother trundled us out to one of their homes the one night, and I was across the street at this woman Marietta's house, and Donnie was hanging out with this with Marietta's son Fred, and they're playing this music, and I was like, "What? I'm like, this is awesome. What is this?" And it turned out it was this. Um, Not this exactly, because there's cute little Ozzy there, but it was Dire of
There's
a
a pop.
Madman, and to this day, like Over the Mountain and Flying High Again just are so ingrained. They were the first things I heard, and I was like, "What?" First, I thought it was cool musically, and then they let me look at the cover, and then I was scared to death because I don't know, I was like 11 or 12 at the time or something like that, and this just like scared the shit out of me. I mean, it's evil looking.
Yeah,
You got
it's
him all
freaky.
bloodied up, the upside down cross. You got Damien Omen looking kid in the back, and dead doves, and this was just so evil. I mean, this stuff scared me back then. I was still traumatized by seeing The Exorcist, man. I mean, this anything with the devil scared me at the time. Like this King Dime, Merciful Fate, seeing Melissa's back cover, for the front cover for that matter. Um, Venom, like any of that stuff, just scared the shit out of me at the time. And but I thought the music was really cool. And then not long after, what Tony was saying, we had an art class that the art teacher used to let us bring records in. And this kid, Jason, in the class would bring in like AC/DC, and he brought in this one and Blizzard of Oz. So that was like my first kind of tasters of the music. And, he was the kid that told me, he came into school one day and he's, oh, did you hear about Randy Rhoads? I still didn't even know I didn't know names of guys and bands yet. I wasn't in the perusing record covers. I wasn't collecting music at the time. I was just like starting to soak stuff in. I'm like, who's Randy Rhoads? Oh, he played guitar with Ozzy. And so it was like that was my intro to it. And then, as I got into music and started listening to bands for the specific purpose of like, oh, I like metal. I like heavy music, and buying records and buying magazines like Hit Parader and Circus, and you read about, or people would come in that had older brothers, and you get all the crazy stories that tell you're hearing about the biting the head off the bat, and um all that kind of stuff. And then I don't remember if it was a MTV news story or if I read it in one of the magazines. It was a big deal, like Ozzy, like, shaved his head, and it was like stuff like that would make like the news blips in magazines and stuff. And he was just like, these stories about him. He was like a wild man. And the video for Bark at the Moon, I can remember that was one of the first things I saw on MTV. I saw that concert on MTV, the one with Gillis and I loved Bark at the Moon when I heard that, and then I bought that. That was the first thing I bought by him, and I played the hell out of that. That partly, A, it's really good, and B, it was during that time where you bought something or you got something from your parents or whatever. You listened to it because you maybe had five cassettes at the time. But
Yeah.
I still to this day love Bark at the Moon. Like I like all those songs. Um, I know some people see it as kind of like a step back from the first two, but I don't know. I mean, it maybe it is kind of, but at the same time, I'm so nostalgic for it. I just love that record. Um,
Nice.
so that's how I got into them. I mean, then I just fell in, as I was going along and my friends were going along and we're getting into metal. It was like an institution. Ozzy's was a big deal. No matter what he was doing, he was always there doing something in the background. And whether it was like something he put out or he was an integral part of, breaking Motley Crue and
Hmm.
Metallica, bringing them out on the road. I mean, it seemed like his fingers were in, then you find out, later, oh, he's in Black Sabbath, as you're finding out about Black Sabbath and listening to them, you're like, oh, he's the singer on the first, 8 Black Sabbath records. Oh, this is double cool now. And so, yeah, I mean, that was my intro. I'll never forget that, just being in that living room, listening to these songs and thinking I really liked the way it sounded, and then seeing that cover and being like, oh my God. Like I was like terrified.
Nice. How about you, Darren?
Yeah, so I mean, we've been into this subject before on the Into the Void podcast, and it was like summer of '78. Um, I was living in Ohio, and kids in the neighborhood were my age. A couple of them had older brothers, and we all liked Kiss, but Kiss at that time was starting to sort of fizzle out a little bit. I'm not sure if it was, I think it was around the time that Dynasty came out. I remember nobody was really that enthusiastic about Dynasty when it came out, but a lot of the kids were starting to get turned on to heavier music from their brothers, or just going in and buying things that looked cool. So at that time, one kid had the new Van Halen record, which everybody was flipping out over. Rush Hemispheres had come out. Um, Let me think, what else was there? Some Alice Cooper, anything that looked heavy, that sounded heavy, that was exciting. And so I went to the record store at one point after I'd seen all this stuff, and I was at least going to get the Van Halen record because that was just awesome. But I went into the record store and I saw a poster advert uh, for Never Say Die, Black Sabbath. And of course, I saw Black Sabbath. Now I'd been familiar with Black Sabbath from browsing through rock magazines and things like that, but I had never heard Black Sabbath yet. But I thought, well, this would be a cool way for me to get something that no one else has. That's pretty cool. Black Sabbath. It's got to be heavy. I'm going to blow all these kids away because I'm going to be the dude that comes in with Black Sabbath and their jaws drop because they're going to hear the heaviest thing, and I'm going to have it. So I bought Never Say Die. Had like, I don't know what records were, whatever they were back in those days, $7, $8. And I was like, I remember I went in there because I wanted to get the new Eddie Money album, Play for the Taking. But I ended up coming out with Black Sabbath, Never Say
Decisions,
Die, which I think,
decisions. If you had taken that other
yeah,
turn there, you could have
Yeah.
been a totally
Pivotal
you could have been
moment.
a
it was a
totally
good,
different
Be wearing
person,
a
right?
skinny tie right now.
that's right.
You'd be shaking.
So as fate would have it, I got Never Say Die. And I took it home, and of course I was expecting something musically that matched the intensity of the name Black Sabbath. And that wasn't the album. That wasn't the right album. But I did like Ozzy's voice, and there were certain things I liked about it. I mean, I really tried to get into it. I mean, if memory serves, it's been a while. I like a couple songs off of it, but I put it aside because there was other things that just were a little bit more exciting to me at the time. And it's 9 years old. I wanted to hear Ted Nugent, Double Live Gonzo. That had just come out. Somebody had that. So at that time, Never Say Die was kind of a dud. And so I moved away from it. The record got put aside, and so did pretty much any interest I had in Black Sabbath at that time. About a year and a half later, um, I was somewhere with my mom, and we were driving, I think, to the mall or something. And on the way there, there was a radio spot for the I'm sorry, Blizzard of Oz tour, and it was only about 30 seconds long. But I heard that voice again, and I knew that it was the singer from Black Sabbath because even in my limited knowledge of heavy music, that voice was recognizable. And so I paid attention to it, and it said, "Coming to the Tower Theater." I'm paraphrasing. Ozzy Osbourne, the former lead singer of Black Sabbath. And then I was like, wow, okay, this is a lot better than that album that I bought before. And the song that I was listening to that they were playing clips from, it was probably like uh, a medley of songs, but I
Yeah.
remember the vocal part of Paranoid, and I just thought I was blown away. Just only hearing it for a few seconds, I was blown away. So we went to the mall, and I was looking around, and I was trying to find this album, and I was, there were some Black Sabbath albums there, but I wasn't really sure, and I wasn't really ready to pull the trigger. Um, but then I went home, and at that time I was also really into rock magazines, Hit Parader, Circus, Cream, and in the back of a one of the hip, it might have been Circus, there was like an import advertisement for where you could buy records, and I saw it was about the size of a postage stamp, the cover of Blizzard of Oz, and I could barely make out any of the details, but I could see enough of it to know what to look for next time I went to the record store. But sure enough, the next time I went to the record store, I tracked it down. I remember I bought Blizzard of Oz and AC/DC Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. Because I was also at AC/DC. I had started listening to AC/DC. John, you said that Back in Black was your intro to
Mhm.
heavy music. Yeah, it was sort of mine too, but more or less. But anyway, so Dirty Deeds was going to be my second AC/DC album, and Blizzard of Oz is now my first Ozzy Osbourne record. It was also his first record. So I took it home, and I was more anxious to listen to the Blizzard of Oz because I love the cover, the skull and the horns and Ozzy and the cross. I mean, everything is just really mysterious. Like, what is this all about? What is he doing? What does this mean? And the dry ice and everything. So I was into horror movies and stuff like that. So took the shrink wrap off, pulled the album out, put it on a turntable, the needle on the record. And when that swirling backwards cymbal effect or whatever it was came crashing through the speakers and that guitar, man, it was just like, holy shit. Life now was never going to be the same. And it wasn't. Um, Song after song, I was just like stunned. It was just so good. It was heavy, but it was really melodic. So it
Mhm.
wasn't really a challenge to listen to because, Crazy Train, it starts, as we all know what Crazy Train sounds like, but it starts kind of heavy, but then it gets into a really melodic vocal verse and chorus and things like that. So it was heavy enough to be kind of excited, but it was also familiar enough where I could relate to the melodies and everything and have the song stuck in my head. But I loved Ozzy's voice. And I still do. I love the way he sounds on that album. There's a certain quality to his voice. I don't know if it's the way it was recorded. It's a little different from Diary, but I really like the way his voice sounds on Blizzard of Oz, and I was really attracted to that as well as the guitar. Loved the songs. Mr. Crowley, that was creepy but exciting
Yeah.
because I was into horror movies and stuff. And so that album, man, that was my album for every day after school, probably for like months, several months. But then as it went on, and I was now an Ozzy fan, and buying magazines, and the magazines Ozzy was starting to pick up in popularity since there was this tour with Motorhead, and the magazines were starting to run pictures of Ozzy and stuff like that. So I bought an issue of Hit Parader, and in that, because it said, I think David Lee Roth was on the cover, but it had Ozzy Osbourne as that was included in the issue. So I bought it, and then I opened to where the article was, and it was Ozzy versus Sabbath, and there it explained what was going on behind the scenes between Ozzy and Black Sabbath and their new singer Ronnie James Dio. So that's where I got some of the history about what was going on. And then the next time I went to the record store, then I started seeing Heaven and Hell, but I wasn't ready to buy that. I still wanted to get more into the Ozzy stuff. So then the album after that was Paranoid, and there I heard that song that I heard on the radio, that concert spot, and loved it, loved the whole album. Again, like you said, Tony, it had kind of an antiquated sound to it. It didn't quite match up with the fidelity of the things that were currently coming out, but it was the heaviness. Ozzy's voice sounded great. Put on War Pigs, the way his voice just came clean out of the gate, basically a cappella. Just amazing, just an amazing voice. I never heard anybody sing like that, and that range and with that kind of clarity. Um, so basically, after that, now I had Blizzard of Oz and I had Paranoid, and then shortly after, Diary of a Madman came out, and then while I was soaking that in, just started buying Black Sabbath albums. Anytime I went to the record store, what's the next one to get? Oh, this one looks cool. Technical Ecstasy. Okay, well here it is. And just buying them all at different times and not having any clue which one was the cool one, which one was the bad one. They were all cool because Ozzy was singing, and I loved Ozzy's voice, and I grew to really love Tony Iommi's guitar playing. So man, for me, for you know 81 to 83, it was just Ozzy and Sabbath obsession, buying all the rock magazines, cutting the pictures out. Even if the picture was like this big, it was of Randy Rhoads, it went on the wall. I mean, the four thumbtacks in there, a little picture of Randy Rhoads.
Yeah.
Just totally obsessed. And then we started to hear about uh, the tour that was coming up for Diary of a Madman, and that was my friend and who I turned on to Ozzy. We were in sixth grade, I think it was sixth grade, and we were desperately trying to get our parents to let us go to this concert with a friend, a friend's older brother. But the parents weren't into that idea. They just didn't like that. And on my side, my mom was talking to my dad, who was talking to my uncles, and my uncles weren't doing me any favors because they were saying, "Oh, those concerts are rowdy. That people throw bottles and set off fireworks. He'll get hurt. He'll get hit in the head with a bottle." So that took it off the table. And at that time, the tour was halted because of the accident that took the life of Randy Rhoads, and I started hearing about that, which was kind of a diversion from the whole trying to go to the concert debacle that was happening. But after the concert was rescheduled, it wasn't very long. April 26th, 1982, my friend's mom was coaxed into driving us. So she drove us, and we were sitting there. We had like first level seats. We got to go. We were so excited. It was amazing. My first concert. Of course, it wasn't with Randy. It was Brad Gillis, but I mean, there was so much stimulation, so much going on. I wasn't really too worried about that. I mean, the castle set, the lighting, Ozzy's theatrics coming rolling out of the chair when over the mountain, when Tommy Aldridge kicked into Over the Mountain. It was just amazing. And of course, being the first concert, we were like swept away by all the activity, the older people, teenagers and stuff that were doing their thing. I mean, the whole place smelled like pot, and that was a little awkward with my friend's mom, she didn't really seem to care, and I'm sure she was no stranger to that. But, we were like, oh, I hope they don't smoke pot the whole time. And of course they did. But there was that, and then walking around. So there was three bands. There was Magnum, which is a band that we had never heard of from from England, and they were okay. It was cool. We were just really like mostly dead set on seeing Ozzy. UFO was pretty amazing. We weren't obviously there to see UFO, but they really impressed. I mean, they were really heavy. They sounded great. I still remember Pete Way fell on stage, and we were looking at each other like, "Oh, did he die? Did he die from drug overdose?" And then a little while later, he got up, and it was cool. It was like our first dive into decadence, um, and then Ozzy came out, and everything that we had hoped for was there. It was just an incredible experience. But it was funny as we were walking around we would leave the seated area and go around the outside spectrum to get like, uh, well, a T-shirt and a tour program, and we saw this commotion as we were walking around, and this guy was there. He was attracting attention to himself, and he had like vampire blood. I guess he was trying to look like Ozzy on the cover of Diary of a Madman, but he had like short blonde hair, and he was wearing like a winter coat, but it looked like he had vampire blood on his face, and he was like acting up and like trying to scare people and everything. And his friends were coaxing him, and we were sort of like looking at that, thinking that was really weird, and it was. So then we made our rounds, got a T-shirt, got the program, went back down, watched Ozzy. uh, One of us had to go to the bathroom or something or get a drink, and we went back out around, and that same guy was there, and he was like totally, now he had like real blood because he got roughed up. Apparently he must have gotten roughed up by security because he was acting up, and he was talking about how he lost his jacket, but it was okay because he still had Ozzy. I just remember that. It's like that was like our catchphrase for a while. Like we would replace jacket with something else and say, "Well, we lost our thing, but we still got Ozzy." You know. So it was just a great experience, and everything at that point. It's you look back on it and on those years, and we really had no worries. We really had no cares at all. School, what you're going to do on summer vacation, what are you going to listen to when you get home, talking to your friends on the phone, reading rock magazines, going to the record stores. It was just an amazing time in my life, and Ozzy was the soundtrack to that. And so, we're talking about recent events and the passing of Ozzy. It really pulls all that into perspective, and it's like the end of an era.
Yeah.
Those days are over, and we know they are because we're old men basically. We're
Yeah.
I think we're all in our 50s, and we still try to act young, and we do, but we're grown ups. We have grown up responsibilities, but we look back. I'm sure I speak for all of us. We look back on those days, and man, it was incredible. And Ozzy was right there. He was like the patron saint of irresponsibility and youth
Yeah.
and innocence and childhood.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, for
beautiful.
me, I had AC/DC was my gateway, but I had an uncle that was only 9 years older than me, and he was into Kiss and Ted Nugent. So I was listening to that stuff. And our local classic rock radio station, Rock 107 out of Scranton, Pennsylvania, used to play what they called rock blocks, where they would play three songs by an artist, and they would play, you'd either get War Pigs, some combination of War Pigs, Iron Man, Paranoid, or Children of the Grave. So I heard this and was like, wow, Ozzy's voice that I always liked the things that were a little heavier and darker, like Kiss's God of Thunder. It was a little bit darker than the other Kiss stuff. AC/DC Hell's Bells. I was always
Yeah.
attracted to that. And when I heard Black Sabbath, I was like, wow, this has that vibe across all of it. And Ozzy's voice had this quality to it that was just scary. It was like creepy. It was haunting or something. And I think that I had a friend who took one of those flat tape players and like stuck it in front of one of his speakers and recorded Paranoid for me. So I think I had Paranoid already. I was aware of Ozzy. Ozzy's in Black Sabbath. And then I went to a Catholic school. So Catholic schools only went to eighth grade and there was no middle school. Went to eighth grade, then I went to high school. So I was in fifth grade at the time. And I remember eating lunch with my fifth grade friends, and a kid comes up, an eighth grader. Now, this was a big thing. Like, eighth graders are so much older than you when you're in fifth grade. And he's like, "Hey, you're pretty cool. Listen, so and so, another eighth grader, he's got Ozzy's new album, and he's going to let everybody look at it." Okay. And he says, after school, right in front of where the buses are, you don't tell too many people, but he's got this record. He's going to show everybody. So, of course, to show up, there's all these kids around. And the eighth graders, like this kid, he's got his backpack, and a bunch of eighth graders kind of like make a perimeter around him, like they're, Secret Service agents or something, right? And he's got the backpack, and he's like, all right, listen up. I'm going to take it out. You're not allowed to touch it. Don't anybody say anything. Just look at it, right? So he opens up the backpack and he's got Blizzard of Oz and he just sort of holds it and just very slowly, like, moves around like this with the record. And that might have been the first time that I saw Ozzy. I remember that friend had only made a cassette of Paranoid for me. And so seeing Ozzy, seeing that cover, Butch, you mentioned like Diary of a Madman. This had the same effect. The smoke, Ozzy with the cross, and just the whole thing seems so scary and creepy.
Hmm.
The kid held it up in the air, then he put it back in his bag and was like, "All right, everybody get out of here. Run before anybody finds out." This is a Catholic school, right? We would have got. So I think right about almost exactly when that kid had that showed that record. So this probably would have been like late 80, early 81. I heard Crazy Train on the radio. I went out and got the cassette and I was just floored. I mean, at this point I had only heard Ozzy through the Paranoid album. But man, hearing like you said, Darren, I don't know coming in. And for me, just that whole record, man, I think back to Mr. Crowley, the organ intro, it was so like epic sounding to me. Revelation, Mother Earth, Ozzy's voice in that, it was so mournful. And this basically set up all the things that I love for the till to today. A lot of it I can trace back to that record. I love melodic stuff, so like Crazy Train, the melodicism across the record. I like things that are darker, almost classical sounding. The Mr. Crowley intro. I remember that hearing Revelation Mother Earth for the first time, and there's that verse right before I think it's when the synthesizer solo comes in, there's a bell hit, dong! And I was just like, oh my, this is so epic. The whole with Randy doing the dun 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 dun, that whole thing. I was just absolutely floored. I couldn't listen to it enough. I think I had gotten a cassette Walkman around that time, and I would listen to it in my car, not my parents' car when my parents were driving me around. And I was just floored by it. I couldn't listen to it enough. Darren, I know you said the same thing. I was the same way. It was like I would come home from school, and it was almost like the first thing. Okay, I got to listen to Blizzard of Oz, just one time, just because I've been waiting all day, to listen to this. And I just fell in love with it. I remember hearing Diary of a Madman for the first time. It was one of these rock blocks on the radio station. They used to do them at 10 o'clock. This is like 9:30 or 10 o'clock. After my bedtime is when they used to do the rock blocks. But they would often talk about them all day long. So they were saying, we're doing an Ozzy rock block tonight, and we have a new song from Ozzy. And I was just like, oh my God, I have to stay up for this. So I didn't turn the light on in my room because I didn't want my parents to know that I was awake. I was supposed to be in bed. I had my headphones on. So by the warm light of my stereo in the room, I think they played like Crazy Train. Then I think they played Paranoid. And the last song they played was Diary of a Madman. And to this day, that is my all-time favorite heavy metal song. And I just remember, I can. put myself there's snapshots, moments in your life that you can just really you almost feel like you're still at that moment, sitting there with the headphones on and the whole la 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 la, that whole thing, and it just and la la ending and just being like, oh my God, this is like it was some sort of transcendental religious experience or something, and I was just so into it. I remember when Randy passed, my dad, I would coming into their room and my dad saying, "Oh, there was a plane crash and some people in Ozzy Osbourne's band died." I remember like, "Oh my God, I hope that Ozzy did." I'm not even sure if no, I knew who Randy was, but I was just like, "Oh my God." And then I found out it was Randy and that King Biscuit Flower Hour. I think that aired before, actually, I looked it up while we were talking, and it aired in January of '82. So I remember listening to that live, and I just couldn't get enough of Ozzy. And like you said, Darren, I went out and I was buying every, Black Sabbath record. And since I only had limited money, I had it all planned out. Like, okay, I've got Paranoid, so I don't need that yet. So I'm gonna get, I think my next one was the first album, maybe. And I remember thinking like, oh, Ozzy's voice sounded so different on that one compared to Blizzard of Oz and Diary. And I was just all in. I mean, Ozzy was my guy. Was there. Just his voice for me just had this quality to it that I loved Brian Johnson. I loved Bon Scott. I was still into Kiss and Ted Nugent. But there was just something about Black Sabbath where I was like, man, I wish Kiss did more things like God of Thunder. I wish AC/DC did more things like Hell's Bells, and I got that with, it was like all that pretty much, when I listened to Sabbath and Ozzy, it just had that vibe for me, and I just loved it, and it just made such a big, impact on me. And like Darren and I talked about yesterday, he was always there for me. Darren, you described it as like a friend, and Ozzy was always there. I stayed with them, pretty much bought every album as they came out. Some I liked more than others, but he was just always there, and it was a really, really special thing, and I loved Ozzy. So. All right, well, there's how we heard Ozzy for the first time. Let's go around and let's talk about Ozzy's legacy and what we feel he means to heavy metal, the legacy that he's going to leave, just what he means to heavy metal. Mike, kick us off.
Butch and I were kind of talking about this last night too, in terms of kind of like, the main pillars of our favorite genre. And, it all started with Black Sabbath, but Ozzy, transcended all of it and became, like you were saying earlier, he became a literal household word or name. Everybody knew who he was. And it reached so far outside of the realm of music that he was making cameos in movies like Trick or Treat, and I forgot he was in Little Nicky and things like that. So when you look at his outreach, or even outside of the realm of music, there's not a whole lot of personality like that came from that kind of a background to where he was, go hide your kids. Ozzy Osbourne is in town too. He's, singing with Miss Piggy on the Muppets album. So, it's come so full circle that his legacy kind of has laid the groundwork for, again, I could be a touchy subject too, because we were saying I don't see many bands that will replace, those so-called pillars or those so-called legacy bands that are coming up. So in that sense, it's like who will follow this legacy? Who will pick up the reins and take off with what Ozzy and Sabbath and everybody have left? So yeah, I mean his Ozzy's legacy just is so immense, and the magnitude and the reach of it far outweighs anything that or our comprehension of it. He's just such an immense personality. So it's an incredible legacy that luckily we will always have the catalog and the music. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see who can pick up that kind of creativity and run with it that Ozzy laid the blueprint for.
Yeah.
All right, John McEntee from Incantation has just joined us. John, how you doing?
Hey, John.
How are you doing?
Yeah. Well, we're
I
going
got to see
around and
it.
we're talking about the legacy, Ozzy's legacy. But tell us, what was your reaction when you heard that Ozzy passed, and what do you talk about what you feel the legacy of Ozzy Osbourne will be? Oh, do we lose you, John? Up, he froze up on us. He's speechless. All right. Well, Tony, you go
While it
ahead while
lasted.
we're. Oh no, there he is. Okay.
There you go. There you go.
Okay, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah, as far as I mean, honestly, I can't say I was like massively surprised that Ozzy passed away. I mean, I think he's been having problems for quite some time. I'm actually more surprised that it happened almost right after his, big event that they had. I mean, that's almost like meticulous timing. Like, how does that happen? I mean, it's
It's like a
really,
movie, John, right?
yes, it's like, yeah, it's like, I mean, you got to hand it to Sharon. I mean, somehow she knew how to throw this big project. I mean, this big event, good way to like send off Ozzy, you know, into whatever you want to say in next realm or whatever he is going to. But it's just amazing that it worked out that way. And not that I mean, obviously it's a tragedy that he passed away. I mean, he's one of the most important people in metal in general, but it's almost to me, it's like a nice way to kind of end it. I mean, even the beginning thing, I was kind of like a little skeptical at first. Like I was thinking like maybe this is like propping poor Ozzy up, and just trying to like milk him out for some more promotion or something. But after watching the event, I got a different vibe from it and think that, you know, Ozzy sincerely liked the fact of being able to say one last goodbye, even though he was in a fragile state or whatever. And it actually was quite, I don't know, beautiful in a way. It's like saddening. And to have him pass right afterwards, a couple weeks afterwards, is like I said, yeah, it's just like storybook ending. I mean, this is like made for like a blockbuster movie kind of ending or whatever. It's like almost like a Queen movie or something like that, with how
Yeah.
perfectly this could be wrapped up. But I mean, obviously, I'm not happy, you know, that he passed away. I mean, but at the same time, the guy was having issues for a long time. I mean, even just the stuff he was dealing with when he's doing the Osbournes. I mean, a lot of people watched it, but I mean, I did too, but I almost felt like bad. Like this poor guy is like, not doing well, and he's doing the show. Like, I don't get a kick out of watching my idols like not doing well with stuff. So the whole time that I was not feeling well and doing well, and he was still kind of in the spotlight, I felt really uncomfortable about. But after watching, like I said, the back to the beginning thing, I was like, I get it now. I was just looking at it from a different point of view and whatnot. And as far as Ozzy's like legacy, I mean, the bottom line is like, I think it's pretty dumb. I see some people, say negative stuff about Ozzy or whatever. And I mean, trust me, there's a lot of positives and negatives you could say about Ozzy's legacy. I mean, there's stuff I agree with, some stuff I don't agree with. But there's one thing for sure is that without all four of those guys putting out that first Black Sabbath album and getting together and playing, you know, I don't know if metal would exist. And if it did, it would definitely be way different than what it is. And, to have it's hard to say. Arguably, one of the biggest parts of those four people lineup is a tragedy. I mean, any of them passing away for metal is a tragedy, in my opinion. But Ozzy's somehow been able to transcend even the amazingness of Black Sabbath with his own career. And, I mean, Sharon did a great job of navigating him. Like I said, he even became like one of the first, reality show people. I mean, who would have thought that? I mean, I never would have thought that. I mean, I wasn't happy about it, but I think it's cool that, she was able to, and he was able to, like, almost make a new career, make new generations. And this guy that's like kind of was a jokester kind of dude was able to touch so many different people in so many different eras of music, pop culture, and you know, it all comes from, that first Black Sabbath album, just, doing something that nobody's really heard in that way before. And a strange thing too is that before I knew he passed, I was coming back from a show we were playing in Quebec, and I was driving at a long drive, like a 15-hour drive. And for some crazy reason, I was like, you know what? I want to listen to like the whole Black Sabbath discography from beginning to end on this trip, and I never listened to. I mean, when I was a kid, I would listen to like say the first 5 or 6 Black Sabbath albums back to back, and just like you know worship to the altar of it. But a lot of those albums I haven't listened to as a full album, and I definitely have not listened to them back to back in like. I mean, we could go 30 years maybe. I haven't listened to them all back to back or whatever. So it was weird because I was listening to them. I was like, huh, these albums are better than I even thought. Like I was so burnt out on them because I listened to them so much as a kid that I was more interested in listening to some of the Dio stuff or some of the Tony Martin stuff. I think just because it was fresh or something. But after listening back, you're like, wow, Paranoid's a really good album. It's like I mean, and it's not just listening to Paranoid on its own is a good album. It's just listening to the transition from first album to blah, 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 going down. It really gave me a whole different perspective. It almost brought me back to the reason why I even liked it. It was really strange because I mean, the news came out yesterday. I think, yeah, it was yesterday came out. And I just got up to Dehumanizer, and I just was like, okay, I got to listen to something else now. I've been listening to Black Sabbath for like I don't know 14 hours or something. And then like almost like an hour later, I see on my phone that someone sent me that Ozzy passed away. It was just a strange thing to happen. It wasn't planned out. I wasn't hoping that anything was going to happen, but it was just after watching it back to the beginning and hearing all those bands play those songs, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Let's just give that discography a listen again. And my perception on it is I'm stronger. I mean, I wouldn't say I have any different feelings about the other stuff I like, but the Ozzy era stuff, some of the stuff that maybe I was burned out on before, I don't feel quite as burned out. It was almost fresh. It was like nice not to hear those albums in a while and listen to that whole transition from song to song things that they would do, especially back in the early albums. I think it was really awesome. So I kind of had like a weird epiphany right before the whole thing kind of went down. It's kind of a strange situation.
Wow. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Tony, what do you think about Ozzy's legacy? What's it going to be?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I had kind of a similar experience to what John just said. With yesterday, I started the day out listening to Ozzy stuff, and I went to work. I listened to Diary of a Madman, then I listened to No Rest for the Wicked, and then just a couple hours later, I'm getting this news. So yeah, it was kind of weird. And I wanted to say something kind of added to what he said about the back to the beginning too. A friend of mine said something today that I hadn't really thought about. They said watching that concert was like the closest thing to watching a living funeral. And I was like,
Yeah,
it makes sense
it's like
now,
it's like a
for
living
sure.
wake show kind of thing or
Yeah,
something.
a
Yeah.
living
Yeah.
weight. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. But as far as the legacy goes, I mean, Ozzy, it's amazing what he's accomplished over the years, and he is definitely one of the leaders of the heavy metal scene. I mean, when he was in the first heavy metal band, the band that started it all, he was able to come through the '80s and rebuild himself, rebrand himself. Because I mean, he was always known as a wacky kind of crazy dude in Sabbath, but he turned himself into first the Madman and then the Prince of Darkness as the '80s and '90s rolled in, and he just he was able to transcend the different phases of music, whatever was popular in hard rock and heavy metal. He changed his style a little bit. He went a little glam there for a while, and even went grunge some during the grungy period. But he was able to always stay, on top of things. I mean, he was always there when the grunge thing and new metal thing started coming in, you know, he could have gone if he could have kept putting records out, maybe not selling a lot of concert tickets anymore. So what did he do? They started the Ozfest. They wanted to get on the Lollapalooza and they couldn't get on Lollapalooza. They got turned down. So they said, okay, let's start our own festival. And that was huge. I mean, it was just, you know, I mean, he kept, you know, he always headlined those. Of course, Sabbath, that's when Sabbath came back again. I thought I'd never get to see Black Sabbath. I don't know about you guys, but it was one of those things. Oh, it's never going to happen. You know, after Live Aid, we thought, oh, there's going to be a Black Sabbath reunion when they did the reunion at Live Aid in '85, and it didn't happen. And I just thought that's a band I'll never see. You know, either version, Ozzy or Dio. And then luckily enough that both versions reunited, and hell, I got to see Ozzy with Sabbath quite a few times. You know, so I'm really happy about you know, everything about seeing Ozzy. I saw Ozzy quite a few times over the years since my first show was the Bark at Moon tour. So I saw him pretty much just about every tour after that for many years. But yeah, he's definitely the one of the kings of heavy metal for sure. I mean, he'll go down in history as that, and it's great to know that he has become a pop culture icon. I mean, he kind of rebranded himself there with the whole Osbourne's reality show. I mean, he's respected by so many people now. He went from being a guy that was the head, you know, he was the focal point of the whole satanic panic there for a while in the 80s, you know, and he's being, you know, invited to, you know, he's been knighted and he's gone to presidential things, you know, like
Yeah.
I mean, well, I saw that thing today. I totally forgot that time he was at that thing that George Bush
Yeah.
Jr.
Yeah.
spoke at, you know, and he called him
Ozzy
Ozzy
Osbourne.
Osbourne, Ozzy
Ozzy
Osbourne,
Osbourne.
you know,
Ozzy
and
Osbourne.
but Ozzy didn't just like do this. He stands up and makes a big
Yeah.
scene.
Yeah.
I mean, that was so cool, you know. So I mean, he'll go to his legacy is definitely I mean, he went out on top. He's one of the best ever. He was a character, just someone you'll never forget, and there'll never be anybody else like Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah,
Butch. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
sure.
John.
I bet. No, it's fine. Go ahead.
I was
No,
gonna
go ahead, John.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, that it's super impressive that he was able to transcend so many different trends, I guess, in heavy music in general. I mean, yeah, how he got the Ozfest thing together was just amazing. And you know, of course, everybody in heavy music grew up with Black Sabbath or Ozzy or whatever, but still, how many other people from that era were able to do that, no matter
Yeah.
how good
No.
they were? I mean, you know, you could argue. I mean, Dio is
Yeah.
amazing. I'm obvious that he's amazing, I think, but he wasn't able to do that. But Ozzy was able to do that. And to be fair, Ozzy with even less talent as Dio was able to do it with his personality
Yeah.
and you know finding a way to utilize what he has. And then another thing, without trying to get too taking over the conversation, a thing that's really impressive about Ozzy from pretty much day one is that he was able to make something special with the tools that he had as a vocalist. He wasn't the greatest vocalist all the time, and he has some amazing moments, don't get me wrong, but you know, he didn't have the toolbox of some of these other great vocalists, but he had the personality, the feeling, and there's just something likable about him, like the class clown kind of thing in a positive way, but he uses it in an amazing way. I mean, and to put out albums, you know, what, 30, 40 years into his career that are still like huge albums is just, you know, it's something to be in awe of as a musician and to see that happening. I mean, I haven't always been on, you know, board of the Ozzy train. Sometimes I'm like, this is just not my thing that he's doing now, but I still respect the fact that he's able to do those things, you know, because everyone, you know, people are people and they have to move, you know, do things their way. And I mean, the dude's massively successful. And regardless of all the BS you could blame about Sharon Osbourne, she took care of her client and of her man. And you can't really falter for that. I mean, maybe some of the tactics aren't the best always, but it's, it's an honorable relationship that they had, with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
Butch, what are your thoughts on his legacy? And
I mean, everyone's made so many good points about it. I'll pick up with what John was saying. Again, man, definitely one of the most amazing things about Ozzy is, like John said, he was, you know, he came. He wasn't like some trained singer that came through Juilliard or somewhere like that. Like, he came from nothing. He came from, dirt and from the mills, and he just, on the strength of just being himself and having, everything you got with Ozzy was him. There wasn't like, he was larger than life without putting it on. We all know rock stars that their personal side is different than what you see, on stage or whatever. With Ozzy, I mean, I feel like with him, you were always seeing the real Ozzy. There was never like an act or a pretense with him. It was always like him being honestly himself and doing what he wanted to do. And just the fact that his voice was just, it was that so unique that while it's been imitated, it will never be duplicated. And he sounds like no one that came before him.
One point I want to bring up, if you don't mind with that, it's pretty important, I think, is he was one of the first heavy metal vocals doing that style, and still nobody really copied it in the same way. I mean, people try to copy it somewhat, obviously, especially in the stoner world or the early heavy metal stuff, but definitely nothing like, nothing comparable to that style. It's like you never really hear a vocals doing Ozzy stuff sounding as good as Ozzy in his prime back in those early Sabbath days. It's just him. Like, there's certain vocal traits that people have and musician traits that are just them. And when they're put into the mix, it's like they can't be copied the same way. Of course, you try, but to me, it's very interesting to have that be the first real metal, I mean, like, metal band. And normally when there's a metal, some band gets popular, everyone comes out and just copies it and does their mimicked version of it. But you could do that to somebody who sings, I don't know, like Rob Halford or Jeff Tate. As long as they're a good singer, they could probably hit those notes. But hitting Ozzy notes, people, even back then, I don't think there was that much really that hit that, at least from my perception.
Steve
Yeah.
Vai, who worked with Ozzy, they were going to put out an album around Osmosis time. He had a great quote where he said, Ozzy's voice exists in its own zip code. Is what he is what
It
he said.
does.
And
Yeah.
and he says, I'm like, and other people only fly over it or something, like nobody actually exists. And it's really true. He has, a voice that is just, it's so unique that
Sure.
yeah, it was really something special. So, all right,
Yeah.
Darren.
And
Oh, sorry, Butch. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say, just in terms of, just to finish off that thought, that Mike and I were talking about this, that it was, it's one of those things, like, not only was his voice, like, it was just as good as, like, we all love Dio. I think most of us probably love Ian Gillan. Like, I think Tony Martin's a great singer. These guys that came into Sabbath, no one could ever get the vibe of the music on the first 8 records could only ever be accomplished by those guys. Like, I kind of like some of the Dio versions of the Ozzy songs, but you don't get the same feeling. There's an emotion, and there's a haunting
Yeah.
quality to Ozzy's voice that it's kind of like, like with Saint Vitus. Like, Wino's probably a better singer than Scott Regers, but Regers does Vitus better than, I mean, it's that voice. The same thing
Yeah.
with Ozzy and Sabbath. That those original, no one can just step in and do exactly what Ozzy did because it was so unique to him. I just think his personality overall, I mean, obviously all his contributions to music, great songs, helping to launch bands. He was always a popular live act, even when the records weren't doing as well. I mean, people were so excited to go see Ozzy. It was, the shows were great. He loved the crowd. Fans loved him. You could tell how much he loved his fans. And it's always just the whole Ozzy, it's just like
Yeah.
you just love the guy. I mean, you couldn't not see him and fall in love with him.
Yeah. Darren?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Ozzy, I think you hit on something, Butch. Everybody was rooting for Ozzy. He was one, he was like an extension of his audience, but he was the guy that was on stage. When you look at bands like Zeppelin and Purple and Cream, whatever, the way that they would conduct themselves on stage was, I mean, you'd see Ian Gillan in some videos where he'd come out and he'd have a sport coat on and he'd walk up to the mic and he'd pull the mic off. Very professional, very controlled. Ozzy, on the other hand, didn't know what to do with himself. You look at that Paris 1970 video, and
Yeah.
he's freaking out. He's like
Yeah.
just going nuts. He's flying all over
Unhinged.
the place. There's no rhythm. But it's endearing because he's feeling it. It's not rehearsed. It's not something that's contrived. This is a dude that is like into what he's doing. And he's just feeling the energy and just going spastic. And likewise, the other members of Sabbath, you look at Bill Warden, he's wearing like floods. You look at his feet when he's playing, he's wearing floods and he's got like dress shoes on, and he's amazing. I mean, his foot is so fast. And you go back and you listen to those albums, and it's just amazing how fast his foot was and how it would integrate so well within the kit. And he was just doing things. He wasn't he wasn't trained to do that. He just did it because he was feeling the music. And you look at them collectively on stage, and you just knew, man, this is the real thing. These guys, they're feeling what they're playing. This isn't something that they're trying to like sort out a demographic, or they're trying to like appeal to a certain market. They're just doing what they feel like is the right thing to do. And I think that's carried on into Ozzy as a solo artist because he never really stopped doing that. He never stopped being the madman. Even when you watch him and the concerts became bigger productions, he's still doing that stupid leapfrog thing that he did where he looked
Yeah.
like, he's trying to jump like 6 feet in the air, but he's only like getting like 6 inches, but,
Yeah.
and he's getting buckets of water and he's like shuffling around, but it's Ozzy, it's not this manufactured. None of it was manufactured. It was the genuine thing. And people, whether they realized it or not, I think people in their soul connected with that. And I know I
Yeah.
did. I mean, I was just talking the other day. I said, Black Sabbath for me, Black Sabbath got me through, and Ozzy got me through my teens, my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, and most of the way through my 50s. And that's the thing that makes them so special to me. In Black Sabbath and Ozzy, it wasn't just entertainment. In my teens, my 20s, some parts of my 30s, it was a way that helped me cope with life, to go back when I was dealing with things or struggling with things and being very frustrated and finding solace in this music and the lyrics and the voice. It really was a big asset, and that's what Black Sabbath and Ozzy meant to me. It was a way to cope with life. It was a tool. So I'm glad that we existed on the same timeline because you know who knows. But as far as Ozzy's legacy, what does he leave? I think he leaves this prototype of a genuine person, not a manufactured record company, record executive thing that's trying to make a buck. I mean, this is the real deal, and hopefully in future generations, somebody will pick up the gauntlet and run with that. I mean, it could be any kind of music, I guess, as long as it's real, as long as it's from the heart. It may not be in the realm of hard rock or heavy metal. It may manifest in something else. I don't know, but maybe that's what Ozzy's legacy is going to be. He may be an influence to a completely different genre of music. Um, and if that's how it manifests, well, that's cool. I hope that in some way it manifests. I hope that heavy metal and hard rock keeps moving forward, and there is that Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne vibe. But who knows? I mean, I don't want to be that old guy, that get off my lawn guy that says, new music sucks. But
God, you can say
yeah,
it.
well,
Sounds
You're
so
amongst
maybe I just
fun.
have
friends.
Yeah.
maybe I just haven't heard enough. But and there's some new stuff I like. Not a lot. I dig Rival Sons. I'm impressed by them. Good 70s classic rock sound. It took me a little while to get into them. They sounded a little too polished, but man, that singer is incredible. I really been getting into them a lot lately. So, but I don't know. I mean, I hope that future generations will take something from the Ozzy and Sabbath and make it as pure as they did, make it real and resonate with people. Make music that reaches inside people, makes them feel good, is comforting, gets them excited, you know, because that's what Black Sabbath did. That's what I think they're responsible for, and Ozzy was too. So I hope somebody comes along and at least and does that. That'd be cool.
Yeah,
Whether
everybody's
it'll
made
happen, who
a
knows?
really great points. I'll add that, and we discussed this a little before we started recording, that when you think about what an icon and figurehead that Ozzy has become for heavy metal, when you think about the really big acts, I mean the selling out football stadiums all over the world. You're talking Metallica, you're talking AC/DC. It's a pretty small group of people, right? If I went to my parents who are not fans of hard rock or heavy metal and anything they know is just because of me, and I said to my dad, "Do you know who James Hetfield is?" He'd have no idea who James Hetfield was. If I played him Enter Sandman, he'd probably go, "Oh yeah, I heard it at a college football game. They were playing it." If I said, "Who's Brian Johnson?" He'd have no idea. If I played Thunderstruck, he'd probably say, "Oh yeah, I saw it in a commercial on TV." If I said, "Who's Ozzy Osbourne?" he'd go, "Oh yeah, yeah, he's that guy sang in Black Sabbath. He's that guy that does X, Y, Z, blah 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 blah." Ozzy has transcended heavy metal in a lot of ways, and he's become this symbol of heavy metal. If you were to line up 50 people that don't listen to heavy metal and say, "Hey, name a heavy metal artist," I bet you out of that 50, you might get all 50 mentioning Ozzy. He's somebody that he's become this sort of represents heavy metal, and some of that is because of the Osbournes and everything, and the way he's become this almost like a media darling, which is kind of funny because I think Mike, you might have mentioned it. You go back to the Satanic Panic, and all the parents hated him, and now he's just sort of this lovable character, which is a great thing, and he's a great ambassador for heavy metal in a lot of ways because, and Darren and I mentioned this when we did our podcast yesterday. I always said Ozzy's like Rocky Balboa. He's this guy that wasn't gifted with any kind of amazing skill set, but he took what he had and he became a champion. And Rocky is this guy he's this lovable character, simple character that you just love this guy and you want to root for this guy. And it was the same way with Ozzy. He was a flawed person. He had his addictions, he had his demons, but you really wanted to root for this guy. Deep down inside, you liked him. He was a likable person, and you wanted to see him succeed. You wanted to see him do well. He never came across as like a rock star. One of you guys mentioned Ian Gillan. or Robert Plant, the Golden God. You know, you never perceived Ozzy like that. Ozzy was the guy that he was this down to earth bloke that everybody could relate to. He was always kind of self deprecating whenever he talked about himself. You imagine him being the guy in the bar that everybody's standing around and you want to listen to his stories and everything, him telling, you know, his life and everything. So I think he leaves this legacy of heavy metal in a lot of ways. He invented it with the other guys in Black Sabbath. He never went away. We've all talked about how through the 90s, when John, I think you mentioned Dio's career, Dio was back to playing clubs in the 90s. You know, Ozzy maybe was had his most successful time period was in the 90s with No More Tears and Osmosis and Ozfest and the Osbournes and all this stuff. So I mentioned this before we started recording. Sometimes when people pass, maybe like an actor or something like that, sometimes your reaction is like, oh, you know, what has that person been doing for the last 20 years? Or, you know, I didn't even know they were still alive. You know, unfortunately, sometimes you say, but with Ozzy, that wasn't the case at all. All these news, I mean, he's been on ABC, CNN, doing extensive thing. CNN did like a 5 minute, 7 minute thing on him, and no, they never have to explain like, oh, this is, you know, oh, Ozzy Osbourne. In case you don't know who Ozzy Osbourne is, you know, it's not the case at all. Everybody knows who Ozzy is. He's kind of a universal thing, and I think he's kind of like, you know, again, like that Rocky Balboa or that Lemmy, you know, whereas Lemmy embodied the heavy metal rock star lifestyle. Ozzy was another guy that was like that. He sort of embodied that hard drinking, hard partying, hard living, and that's probably part like Lemmy. We kind of thought, or like Keith Richards, you think these guys are going to live forever, and it's just sort of a sad. Even though John, like you mentioned, we all knew he was sick. We all knew that he wasn't long for the earth, but it still hits hard when it does hit because in the back of your mind, you're just kind of thinking, man, is he going to be the guy that just beats the odds and he lives till he's 110 or something like that? And unfortunately, it wasn't to be, but we have this legacy, we have these memories, we have this awesome music. I've been spinning Ozzy records. I've got them on my shelf back there, nonstop, and just I sit back and I just marvel at the catalog, man. 8 amazing albums with Black Sabbath. I adore his first 5 solo records. I absolutely worship. You know, it's a little hit or miss after that for me. But man, that's a pretty solid run. 8 plus 5, what is that? 13, you know, 13, you know, just absolutely classic records. So we'll always have that. All right, before we go, why don't we just go around the horn again? And if everybody's got any final thoughts or just anything that they want to say in general. So Mike, kick us off.
Um, I forgot which one of you guys said it, but you nailed it. And I think I had heard somebody else say it too. It was back to the beginning, couldn't have been a better send off. And now that Ozzy has passed, you look back and it was like a living funeral. I mean, you couldn't get a better celebration of life than that concert. And I know we were all very, you know, treading thin ice on how is this going to get pulled off, and we were worried if Ozzy could do it. And you know, it came together so fast that a lot of us thought, you know, it was just going to be a train wreck. Thankfully, that was very far from it. I thought it was an excellent show all the way around, whether you liked every performer or not. But you know, the main focus of that was Ozzy's solo set, and then the ultimate goodbye with Black Sabbath. So I think it was very very fitting. It was a culmination of Ozzy's life. I know he's the focal point. I know it was for Black Sabbath too, but you know, with Ozzy passing, you can't help but put the focal point on him. And I'm very very happy that we all had that final. You know, even though we were over here in the States watching it on TV, we were, you know, able to, not knowing it at the moment, but able to say goodbye to Ozzy in a really good, you know, it was a triumphant kind of way. So yeah, it's gonna
Tony?
he'll be missed.
Tony?
Yeah. Um, I'll just extend on that. I mean, you took the words out of my mouth, basically. I'm glad to see that Ozzy went out on top. I mean, he played in a stadium with the band that he started with. They did a miraculous show. and you couldn't ask for a better send off. And I'm glad that everything went well with that. And he was able to perform because, like you said, it was kind of iffy. We didn't know if he was going. They were saying at one point he didn't know if he was going to perform or not, and he'd be there. And I heard that he didn't take any of his medications for days leading up because he wanted a clear mind to be able to perform, with a clear mind. And because the medication sometimes makes him kind of groggy and stuff. And he just wanted to go out there and do it, and do the best he could. And he did. And I mean, it was just awesome to watch him. He was trying to stand up, he really wanted to stand up and he gave it his all. The whole, I mean, Sabbath, the four original guys, they gave it his all. They're all. I mean, Bill Ward did an excellent job too, and it was good to see. I'm glad they included him, and they ended it like they started it. The only thing that would have made it any better if they had just ended with the song Black Sabbath. But that we could only wish that would have been back to the beginning.
Ended where it started. Yeah.
Well, they rehearsed
circle.
it. They rehearsed it, and they had planned on playing it, but for whatever reason, they didn't. I guess
there was a curfew supposedly there, and things probably when you do a big show like that, even if you've got it on a schedule, things can kind of get off schedule just a little bit. And I'm sure that usually the last band's going to suffer because of that, because they're going to probably have to be the one that gets cut short. So he I think Sharon or something said that Ozzy was if Ozzy had done one less song, maybe they could have got another Sabbath song in. But it's like when you're on a curfew, you're on a curfew. So that's just the way things go.
Yeah. Butch?
I mean, man, I think if there was ever a situation that was evidence that we're living in the Matrix and that someone's like programming all of this, it's Ozzy's story in general. I mean, his life has had every up and down you can have in it. I mean, every triumph, like tragedy, his addictions, rising from that. I mean, he had a career that started at a time where bands didn't even expect to last more than a couple records. That not only did he have a successful career with Sabbath, but he left the band and was at another low point in his life and came back again. Like the odds of something like that happening, like, and coming back probably arguably more successful as a solo artist. It's just the odds of all of this happening are so amazing. And to look at his life, like you couldn't have written it any better than the way it all played out. I mean, it rose from nothing, became the biggest thing in the world. One of the greatest, probably the biggest metal icon we'll have. And man, it's just something. It's something to think for me. It's hard to almost wrap your head around his whole story.
Yeah. John?
Well, I mean, I agree with everything you guys are saying as far as that. It's like don't necessarily want to repeat everything, but definitely Tony Dio was correct on back to the beginning. It was a great send off, way better than I expected. Even the performances I didn't like, it was still nice just to see all that respect throughout the music industry. People really realizing where this all came from, and if you don't mind just relating the importance of Black Sabbath to me is I mean, when I was just learning how to play guitar, I'd be in my room practicing whatever I'm supposed to practice, but I'd have that Black Sabbath Never Say Die video on at the same time, just watching that, and just I have that damn video on all the freaking time in my house back home, and it was just crazy because my guitar teacher was just like, and he was a metal dude. He's just like, man, you really like, worship this band Black Sabbath. It's kind of like how I feel about Led Zeppelin or something like that. And it was something about hearing that and just the feeling of that music that just it transformed me as a musician. And that feeling of those four guys just playing together and vibing on the stuff and having those heavy tones and just the passion in it. It really shaped me personally as a musician. I'm sure it did the same thing to thousands, if not millions, of other musicians over the years. And for Ozzy and Black Sabbath, and of course the Ozzy Osbourne band stuff, to have that kind of impact on the music world is just amazing. I mean, the more if more bands followed the template of early 70s Black Sabbath, probably music in general would be just a hell of a lot better than it is right now. Sometimes I think it's forgotten that just four people just vibing, not knowing where this journey of music's going to take you, and you just by default you happen to create a style with I don't know how many bands are metal now. Is there maybe a million? I don't know.
Yeah, at
Have
least.
Yeah.
kind of input is unbelievable. I mean, and the I don't even think they were necessarily trying. They were just being themselves. And as a musician myself, and I don't know if all of us are musicians, but I think that's for me, that's a beautiful thing is to create something just from being yourself. And I totally respect that. And yeah, I just hope that and it usually happens when someone passes away, their legacy gets even bigger than it does before, and hopefully it helps change the tide of music, so people won't be just worried about this you know ridiculous ultra process stuff, and sometimes just go into the damn room and just play what you want to play and tell the world to piss off. And if it means something, it means something. If not, just enjoy it. And I think that's the vibe that they were doing back then. I mean, you compare what they were doing to music back then, it's you know, people would just be like, "What the fuck's wrong with these guys?" doing not knowing that what is it now? 50 more than 50 years later,
Yeah.
it's
50, yeah,
strong
56.
impact is like so it's hard to explain even how big the impact is. I mean, I can't even imagine a world without Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath. It's just, I mean, certain bands you could say, okay, maybe that doesn't need to exist or things wouldn't change that much. But without Black Sabbath and early Ozzy stuff, I mean, the early Ozzy stuff helped kind of jumpstart the whole heavy metal thing, new wave of British heavy metal. I mean, it was like right there, right out of the gate. I mean, just phenomenal. And I'm grateful that yeah, I live in a time when Black Sabbath existed, and I'm every time I write or do anything musically, I'm just happy that that is a fundamental in my brain to how music should be and stuff.
Well said. Darren?
On.
Yeah, I'm going to echo John. Whenever somebody dies, it's kind of unfortunate that they become really popular.
That
And I mean,
sucks.
Ozzy's,
Yeah.
well, it sucks for them. I guess it
Yeah,
won't suck for Sharon. And, anybody who's related to Ozzy, they're going to have a lot of money. But
yeah, exactly.
the good thing is though that and I think even the Back to the Beginning show is making probably more people aware of Black Sabbath and the legacy of Black Sabbath than maybe they were prior to that. This young blood guy that John and I were talking about when we did our wrap up of the Back to the Beginning, our review of the Back to the Beginning. Like we had never heard of him, and I'm not really sure that I'm going to follow him or that I'm even a fan of his, but I really like what he did with Changes. There's a
That
lot of
was
heart and
great.
Yeah.
soul into that, and he knocked it
Yeah.
out of the
Excellent.
park.
Excellent. Yeah.
But he obviously is somebody that has some popularity. Maybe it's obscure to us, but somebody likes him. I mean, he made it to that show, and the people that follow him are now who probably weren't really familiar with Black Sabbath or Ozzy. Well, now they are, and
Yep.
and I think that as things progress and we move away from this, and after all the dust settles and Ozzy fever starts to kind of subside, I think when you do inventory of everything that's happened, and you look back in history. I think that it's going to be a remarkable story. It's going to be really, really interesting because there are so many things about Ozzy's career and even Black Sabbath that are so unique that I think people, upon closer inspection, because of renewed interest or an awareness, are going to look at it and say, "Wow, that's fascinating." I mean, this guy, he was like kicked out of his band, basically, wasting away in a hotel, you could look at it, maybe it's going to be a romance. I hope it isn't, but it could be. I mean, depending, history is oftentimes interpreted, um, and it'll have, a certain amount of interpretation involved with it. But it's a fascinating story, and I think it's going to be a story that's going to just like it's going to be larger than life, and what we've witnessed is pretty remarkable. Oz, the career of Black Sabbath, everything that they're responsible for. They're responsible for heavy metal. Um, Ozzy was a former singer. He built this amazing career, and he did all these things, and that's history. And that we know, we were there, we witnessed it. But in the future, I mean, it's going to be something that's probably going to be even magnified even more and romanticized and made larger than life. And it's going to be, who knows, 50 years from now, people are going to be talking about Ozzy Osbourne, and he's going to be this character that is kind of removed from reality, but in a way built up in a cool way that kind of serves as like um, an icon, that this rock and roll deity that will be legendary. And so, I
Rebel.
mean, that's how I look at it. I mean, I think that this is like the actual real life history of Ozzy. His lifespan is chapter one. What happens after this is going to be the next chapter. Now, he's not going to go away. People aren't going to forget about Ozzy just because he's dead.
No.
It's going to be something that's going to turn into something pretty big, I think.
It'll be
Yeah.
way bigger, I think.
Yeah, and
Oh yeah.
what everybody sort of said this in, at one time or another, that we're grateful that we were there for this, that this we were here for heavy metal. When they write the history of heavy metal 150 years from now, there'll be a huge chapter dedicated to Black Sabbath and to Ozzy Osbourne. And we were here able to experience this. The Back to the Beginning concert, Darren and I said this over and over, that it's nice that they were doing this tribute, because usually when they do things like this, it's after a person has already passed, right? And what's the point in celebrating somebody? Celebrate their life while they're still here, so they can be there for that. So they were able to do that, and yeah, I just think that Ozzy's legacy now, I hope that it does open it up, maybe to new generations, and it will live on, because like I said, when with the history of heavy metal, Ozzy is the godfather of heavy metal, and his influence through Black Sabbath, through his solo career. Somebody said this really early on, and I think this can't be understated. Like, somebody mentioned Motley Crue and Metallica, and even through the '90s, there's been tons of bands that are coming out, Slipknot, and all these bands that are saying it was Ozzy and Sharon that got us our start, and so just the importance to Ozzy Osbourne and the story of heavy metal, just can't be stated. And I think as time goes on, it we'll all appreciate that more. And I'm just grateful that we were here to be able to grow up with this, and to sort of be, Darren, you mentioned it was like losing a friend. It was sort of a part of our life. He came into our lives, right at that time. You're 10, 11 years old, at that crucial point in your life where you're forming who you are. And he's sort of been this crazy uncle that's been there, with us through all of this. So, all right. Well, thanks to everybody out there, all the guys here, all the dudes. John, thank you for joining us here to discuss the legacy and share our memories of Ozzy and our feelings of Ozzy. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more Ozzy talk in the next weeks and everything. So thank you guys all for joining us here. To everybody out there, Let us know in the comments. We started this conversation with the first time we heard Ozzy. So let us know in the comments down below. When was the first time you heard Ozzy? What was the impact that hearing him for the first time had on you? What was Ozzy's impact on you through your heavy metal journey? And what do you think Ozzy's legacy will be? And just let us know in the comments down below all your thoughts there on Ozzy, the legend, the icon. Thanks to everybody again, and we'll see you real soon.